Well, thanks everyone for sticking with it. You get to it's like the last, 5 weeks, a long time to talk about like a book. It's like 130. I mean, this is like, and it's like, it's got really big font relatively, and it's small pages. So so I guess the good thing is if you're not like a very avid reader, it's kind of like, okay, this is a pace I can deal with. And if you are an avid reader, you probably have 14 other books going. So. But anyway, thanks for sticking with this, and we'll conclude our journey. And kind of like in the book, it's not chapter 5; it's the epilogue. So today's the epilogue as well. So basically, that's the way to set it up to say we'll go with a whimper and not a bang. So setting expectations is important. So just a reminder: our verse from Philippians 4:5: "Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near." Just that reminder again that with all that we experience in our lives, and a lot of even what Hamilton talks about in this book, there's a lot of harshness. There are hard edges that come with a lot of the realities that we encounter, even in things that seem as kind of benign as buying and selling things. There are harsh edges. So we are talking about living the good life today, and just a reminder, not just in our time here, but Jesus kind of, I don't know, I'd be willing to say Jesus knows what he's talking about. And so here we have him in the Sermon on the Mount talking about starting by looking in the mirror. And so that's our starting point. Just want to circle back to kind of center us again with one of the ideas we talked about last week. So I used the image of raspberries. Someone said they went to Aldi and got raspberries right away and gobbled them down. So same thing happened in our house. I got a thing of raspberries, and those things were gone in no time. But just that reminder about, and we enjoy those first fruits, those ripe, delicious raspberries that are on top. And so I think that, for me personally, it's the idea of these raspberries that it's those first fruits that if we're willing to commit there's something about being generous with those first fruits that then change our lives and change our perspective. So certainly the gift does good out in the world, we trust, but it's also important for us to give as well. And the unfortunate thing is too often we can be numbed into the practice of worst fruits giving rather than first fruits giving. And so kind of leaving the moldy bits at the bottom to say, well, this is what I got left over. I cleaned out the fridge, and here's what you got. I should have brought it in. Michelle sorry, I'm not calling on you for anything, but the food donations that get made down, I still have this. There's a bag of almonds. One of those big Costco bags of almonds that someone donated, which is good. We want to, we encourage that, except they had expired 7 years previously. Someone else had donated, was it mustard? Mustard that expired before some of the people who work here on staff were born. I mean, it's 20th century mustard, and it's not like, vintage goes with a lot of things. Mustard isn't one of them. So to me, that's probably not first fruits giving. And so, and one of the phrases that Michelle uses that I appreciate is the idea of donating with dignity. And that's a really important concept, to say that we certainly want to experience dignity in our lives, and so we want to offer that to others as well. And even when Gabriel comes in a couple weeks to talk about settled, that's one of their driving values: how to offer dignity to people wherever they are in their journey. So then part of that first fruits giving is the fact that we do have the ability to decide for ourselves. So we're not. It's not dictated to us, but 2 Corinthians 9:7, Paul writes, "Each of you must give as you have made up your mind, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver." So maybe in your own life of giving, of stewardship, of using the gifts God has given you, do you Would others see you as a cheerful giver? Do you experience yourself as a cheerful giver? And again, why or why not? Something maybe for all of us to think about. So living the good life. The place I'd like to start today is with a poem called The Good Life. Maybe you're familiar with this poem by Tracy K. Smith. And so it's a fascinating little poem that she wrote here. I'll read the poem, and then there's a kind of a reflection that I found about it too. So, The Good Life. When some people talk about money, they speak as if it were a mysterious lover who went out to buy milk and never came back. And it makes me nostalgic for the years I lived on coffee and bread, hungry all the time, walking to work on payday like a woman journeying for water from a village without a well, then living 1 or 2 nights like everyone else on roast chicken and red wine. So this then is a reflection about it and a little more background about this poem. And then this came from an Episcopal church in Richmond, Virginia. They have just a resource where they kind of reflect on poetry and share some of that. They call it Wellspring Poetry for the Journey. And one of their priests, Allison Say, wrote this kind of in reflection on this poem. And it's interesting background on this as well. When the Metropolitan Transportation Authority in New York City launched its Poetry in Motion series, the mission was straightforward: to offer a moment of timelessness in an otherwise busy and chaotic day for millions of subway riders and rail commuters. An excerpt from Walt Whitman's Crossing Brooklyn Ferry was the first to be displayed in 1992, and by its 10th anniversary, Poetry in Motion had exhibited more than 200 poems or excerpts by writers from around the world, from centuries old to contemporary. And when the program was retired in 2008, it had circulated more than 2,000 poems for its 8.7 million riders nonstop across the MTA's 5,000 square mile travel region. The MTA has since created what is now the Arts and Design program, which selects and installs permanent artworks in subway and commuter rail stations, striving to create meaningful connections among sites, neighborhoods, and people, and all in response to a larger rehabilitation of the transportation system at large. So just imagine that, beauty as a part of public transportation. You know, it's a fascinating project. So Tracy K. Smith's poem, The Good Life, appeared in 2013, paired with work by New York artist Amy Bennett. Of the program, Smith, a longtime New York City commuter, writes, "I know that the poems I see on those trains do something to lift me out of the drudgery of the everyday, to elevate my sense of myself, to remind me that I'm not just a consumer, which is what all the ads in that same space are attempting to convince me that I am." She continues, "I get emails almost every month from someone who doesn't consider him or herself a reader of poetry, but who has been reminded of something real and powerful by my brief poem, The Good Life. Poems activate and affirm our sense of being individuals, of having feelings, of having been affected powerfully by the events and people that touch us." The poem is clear, vivid, specific, but it isn't without questions. The biggest, perhaps, so what is the good life? How do we get it? Or in this case, get it back? Nostalgia is a slippery muse. The speaker longs for an earlier and hungrier time when she was, quote, like a woman journeying. This is complicated in the way memory almost always is, as we work through that tension between what was and what is, between then and now. One possible and oversimplified, I'm sure, conclusion might be that our hunger, once satisfied, is more romantic in hindsight, the journey more inspiring once we've arrived at our destination. But I think Smith is up to something more nuanced, something larger, something less answerable. Just when we think we've arrived, we realize the road continues. The landscape changed and is changing still. Anyone who has lived or is living on coffee and bread, waiting for payday and imagining everyone else, down to their roast chickens and red wine, has considered a life that is otherwise. It's a primal instinct to want more, even if we have it all, or at least to want different, want otherwise. So it's worth continuing. The essay goes on from there, but you can also look it up if you'd like, or if you want, I can get you a copy of that essay. But that's the thing about what is the good life. And, we've talked about this idea of kind of always wanting more, that culturally we have this addiction to more, that we can never really be sated or satiated. We kind of always want more. And so just something worth kind of keeping in mind. And here's an example. The last comic I'll share with you from a couple days ago. Wumo is the comic. Husband talking to his wife. Why did I buy a combine? Are you really asking me that, Gertrude? Have you seen the neighbor's new lawnmower? It's a garden tractor. I can't let him win. Which, of course, is ridiculous. And it's one of those things where it's funny because it's true. Because we do this all the time, in sometimes obvious and other times subtle ways. We try to keep up with the Joneses or exceed the Joneses because we see it somehow as a competition. He is saying he doesn't want the neighbor to win, so he's got a combine where I might have to build a bigger barn to store that thing too. And so that's just, again, something for us to consider. How tempted are we to live that way? And what joy does that bring? That's the subtitle of the book, Discovering Joy. And so, you can discover joy or try to discover joy through competition and consumption. But the case that Adam Hamilton's been making, that I think we've been talking about as a group, and probably in your small groups, though, is that idea of discovering joy through simplicity and generosity, which is a very different narrative than what we see illustrated here. And this comes out in kind of all these facets of our church. And we actually, because of the work I do, I feel a very intense pressure to engage in competitive Christianity. Like we try to make our churches compete against one another. Like we got to win, or there's this other church that's doing this thing, so we have to do it, and not just do it, but do it as much or better than they do. Rather than saying, oh, maybe God's doing something unique for that unique place, and God is doing something unique here as well. And I know we live in a competitive Christian environment because the two questions I get asked the most about most anything is how much or how many? How much or how many? It's all reduced down to that. And whatever the answer is, the next question is, well, how does that compare to last time? And then if the number is smaller, be like, well, what messed up? What did you do wrong? If the number is bigger, it's well, how do we make it even bigger next time? And so that just drives into that competitive sense that we have to outdo our neighbors in one way or another. So what is the way that we as followers of Jesus are invited to follow? Is it the way of bigger, better, faster, more? Or is the way perhaps something different? So speaking of numbers, and just so we're aware too of our larger cultural landscape, this is a recent graph that was, Ryan Burge does a lot of work with the U.S. Census, just all the religion data that's out there. And he's a sociologist, and he likes to make graphs, and it's great. And he's written books, and they're great. But this is the number of adults who either never attend or who attend weekly religious services in this country. So this is the entire country from 2008 to 2022. So the number of people who attend worship weekly has gone from just over 70, or about 70.5 million in 2008 to just over 62 million in 2022. And so, this counts all the online stuff. So it's not just like you're going to church, but it's like you're worshiping weekly. whereas those who never worship, gone from 44.5 million in 2008 to over 85 million. And so, if the only okay answer we have is more, but the world around us is saying, no thanks, we have some dissonance there. So it's just important for us to be aware. This is just data, and what we do with it, we can decide. And so hopefully that can encourage us to think about other metrics than more as what we look at or pay attention to. And maybe it's an opportunity for us to find ways to ask God to enrich our faithful imaginations as to what does the way forward look like. So anyway, it's data. And as we consider about what it means to live the good life, just a reminder from 1 Timothy 6:19, take hold of the life that really is life. Because there's a lot of counterfeits that are out there that are trying to offer the good life, but oftentimes it's not really the case. So, so here's what Hamilton offers as 4 keys to the good life. And in your group, you can even talk about it. Do these feel like keys to the good life? And then even, our driving question is, what is the good life? How would you define what that's about? Because there's lots of versions as to what the good life is. But he offers these 4 keys: to cultivate gratitude, to pursue a purpose bigger than yourself, to live beneath your means, and to apply Jesus' teaching that it is better to give than to receive. So you can consider which of those resonate with you, or which one feels freeing, or which ones feel freeing, which ones feel, oh man, that pinches a little. I don't know. And then reflect on why that could be. Because I think folks, especially what I experience, folks who do truly, I think, live out these 4 qualities tend to have a pretty good perspective about life in the world. And I think you're here too. So just worth talking through a little bit. So kind of this idea of the good life tends to be keeping up with the Joneses and acquiring more. And, we can look at, there's lots of global statistics as to what people, like I was at Feed My Starving Children yesterday with my sons. He had a school group that went there. So we were at Feed My Starving Children. And I'm always reminded of, because if you've been to Feed My Starving Children, you've seen all the numbers, you hear the stories, and they do a good job of telling the narrative as to why this is important. But I'm always struck by, just kind of how little it is that it takes to change so many lives, and then how little so many people all around the world. Because yesterday I was sitting right next to where I was at the Coon Rapids location. Right next to where I was sitting was the big map with here's where all the locations are, where they've got the people on the ground who help distribute and make things work in the different cultures. Because one of the beautiful things is they don't assume that we have it figured out. They say, actually, the people who are there know better than we do. We can get them the food, and then they can take it from there. Which is probably why Feed My Starving Children has such a high success rate of the percentage. It's like over 99% of the food gets to where it's supposed to go, which is like an impossible number. I think the Spirit's up to something there. But what I was taken by is all these places all throughout the world where they need these manna packs to help be helpful. And I also saw a statistic a few weeks ago in some of the enough stuff I was preparing that I think it was around 30% of food in this country goes to waste. So it's a very interesting, balance there to hear those 2 stories. So, kind of it's that driving question again. What is enough? So to talk about what's enough, just a toothpaste story from my own life. Which it's toothpaste, so it's kind of a dumb story, but it's stuck with me. So when Karen and I, we got married in seminary, our first calls were in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Like nowadays, Luther Seminary, if you go, your tuition is covered. That was not the case for us. So, we had gone to college and to seminary, and then, you get your few months and you got all the student loans to pay back and everything else. And then you've got this starting pastor salary in this remote rural location, and math, the way things add up. But it was just the two of us. Somehow we got a mortgage for a house. I don't know how. That was really dumb of them. We didn't default. We just didn't have any assets. We're worth negative tens of thousands of dollars. Can we get a house? Sure. So anyway, this little house out in rural Ishpeming, and it's just the two of us. It was before we had kids, starting on our careers, so we just kind of started living life. And this was, I don't even know how long into, kind of within our first year when we were there. Karen was part of the women of the ELCA retreat for her church. So here's the picture of Ishpeming. So it's a mining community in the UP. And it had 4 ELCA churches in a town of 8,000 people. We have 8,000 members here. So, and Lutheran wasn't the predominant denomination either. So, but it's because there was the kind of the out-of-town church for the folks that lived a few miles out. So that was one of the churches. And then Karen was at the big Finnish church, because that was the biggest, Norwegian. I was at the little Norwegian church, literally kitty corner across. If I stuck my head out my office window and looked down, and she stuck her head out, we could actually see one another, because the churches were kitty corner. The Swedes had been downtown, but in the 60s they actually bought land and moved to the highest point in the city. So make of that as you will about the Swedes. And so Karen was going to the Welker retreat, the Women of the ELCA retreat, and so she packed, she went there, and when she got there, she realized she didn't have any toothpaste, because we only had 1 tube of toothpaste in our house. So there was no extra toothpaste for her. We didn't have a second tube of toothpaste, and so I just remember she came. So one of the other women there had toothpaste, said, well, here, you can have this one, and then even just take it home. You clearly need toothpaste. But it had never struck us before that we needed more than 1 tube of toothpaste. And so it just sticks with me, because I think about where my life is now, and maybe that's part of the nostalgia that Smith is talking about in her poem. We survived that just fine, and our teeth are good. We don't have any cavities. But it was enough for us to have 1 tube of toothpaste, except for that one weekend, but still someone else helped Karen out. So it's just something, that for whatever reason has stuck with me. And I'm probably still learning lessons from it, or there are even further lessons that I can learn from it. So I'm not even sure if it means anything, but I think it feels to me like, at least in my life, there's something about that toothpaste story that hangs on. All right. Another thing kind of in the book that he does a nice job of, he being Hamilton, is unpacking Psalm 13. And he starts with the last 2 verses, which read, "But I trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me." And so you hear that, and like his point was really, you read that in isolation, like, well, this person's kind of got it made. They must be on easy street. These are words of praise and admiration for God, and it's easy to do when things are going well. But then when you read the first 4 verses, it casts those last 2 verses in a very different light. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? We know what it's like to ask that question. And it's okay to ask that question. Let's be very clear. The Bible has that question posed to God, not just here, but many other places. We can bring our hard questions to God. How long must I bear pain in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day long? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep the sleep of death, and my enemy will say, I have prevailed. My foes will rejoice because I am shaken. But I trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. So there's something about that willingness to see God dealing with us bountifully, even when we're wondering just where God is. And that's part of perhaps the contradiction or even paradox that we all live in. It's just part of being human. I mean, that's what sociologists will tell us, that living in contradictions is just a reality that all of us have to navigate. It's simply part of the human condition. And so I think Psalm 13 does a beautiful job of capturing that we can trust that God is continuing to provide enough, even when we feel bereft in some way or another. And then that can help us, perhaps keep perspective in the midst of those difficulties, to know that there's something about this praise and thanksgiving that is coming. So I want to talk about John 14, verse 6. It's not by accident I'm talking about the way. And what's the way to live the good life? So this is one of the most famous, or most at least frequently used scripture passages, or part of the most commonly used. Probably Psalm 23 and then John 14 get used at funerals and memorial services the most. So actually, if you ask a church musician, they just have this memorized, because they are at funerals far more than any pastor, because they're there all the time. So if you ask David Frank, he could probably quote all those, and then all that. But so this is Jesus talking with his disciples, and Jesus says, "And you know the way. I've prepared a way before me." And then Thomas is great. It's doubting Thomas is maybe a bit of a misnomer. Probably my favorite disciple, because he asks the questions that everyone else is thinking, which is great. So Thomas asked, "Well, how can we know the way?" And Jesus said, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." So it seems that Jesus might be offering that the way to the good life is somehow through following him. Jesus doesn't say anything about keeping up with the Joneses, about winning, about anything else. He just says, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." And so then it's that claim at the end, too, that I want to just want to take a moment to unpack as we think about enough. Because I don't want us to try to limit Jesus here either, because sometimes, I kind of hear people turn this claim of to Jesus, and it diminishes Jesus and his abilities in some of the ways that I've heard that last phrase, "No one comes to the Father except through me," the way I've heard that interpreted. So I just want to share a little bit from Rob Bell's book, Love Wins, which is a book that people either adore or despise. It's got something potent in it when he basically got kicked out of the church he founded because he wrote it. And I kind of like that. Not that he got kicked out, but that he was brave enough to say, here's what I hear God saying. Here's what I hear Jesus saying. So this is just his reflection that I find very compelling about these words of Jesus. John remembers Jesus saying, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." This is as wide and expansive a claim as a person can make. What he doesn't say is how or when or in what manner the mechanism functions that gets people to God through him. He doesn't even state that those coming to the Father through him will even know that they are coming exclusively through him. He simply claims that whatever God is doing in the world to know and redeem and love and restore the world is happening through him. And so the passage is exclusive, deeply so, insisting on Jesus alone as the way to God. But it is an exclusivity on the other side of inclusivity. First, there is exclusivity. Jesus is the only way. Everybody who doesn't believe in him and follow him in the precise way that is defined by the group doing the defining isn't saved, redeemed, going to heaven, and so on. There is that kind of exclusion. You're either in or you're going to hell. Two groups. So he's saying that's one view. It's not his view. Here's another one. Then there's inclusivity. The kind that is open to all religions, the kind that trusts that good people will get in, that there is only one mountain but has many paths. This inclusivity assumes that as long as your heart is fine and your actions measure up, you'll be okay. And he's not really going there either. And then there is an exclusivity on the other side of inclusivity. This kind insists that Jesus is the way, but holds tightly to the assumption that the all-embracing saving love of this particular Jesus the Christ will of course include all sorts of unexpected people from across the cultural spectrum. As soon as the door is open to Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, and Baptists from Cleveland, many Christians become very uneasy, saying that then Jesus doesn't matter anymore. The cross is irrelevant. It doesn't matter what you believe and so forth. Not true. Absolutely, unequivocally, unalterably not true. What Jesus does is declare that he and he alone is saving everybody. And then he leaves the door way, way open, creating all sorts of possibilities. He is as narrow as himself and as wide as the universe. He is as exclusive as himself and as inclusive as containing every single particle of creation. When people use the word Jesus, then, it's important for us to ask who they're talking about. Are they referring to a token of tribal membership, a tamed, domesticated Jesus who waves the flag and promotes whatever values they have decided their nation needs to return to? Are they referring to the supposed source of the imperial impulse of their group, which wants to conquer other groups in the name of Jesus? Are they referring to the logo or slogan of their political, economic, or military system through which they sanctify their greed and lust for power? Or are they referring to the very life source of the universe, who has walked among us and continues to sustain everything with his love and power and grace and energy? So that's just part of the deal of maybe Jesus is enough, and we don't need to limit or reduce Jesus to what, just kind of makes us perhaps feel comfortable. So if you haven't read Love Wins, read it. You'll love it or hate it. I don't know. Great book. So last thing I want to share is the very end of the book, Enough, because I think this is as poignant of a statement as the little tome includes. The paragraph starts, "I wonder if you're a success in life." And then it concludes this way: "It has everything to do with how you love the people who were put in your path, maybe put along your way, how you made the world a better place by investing in other human beings, and how you trusted God's unfailing love. When you do those things, nobody will have to tell you about how to find the good life. You will know for yourself that you are living it." So it's in those relationships and in our investment in this grand human experiment God is doing through us that perhaps the good life comes. So that's all I got. Blessings on your discussion. Remember, next week, show up, but there's no class. Don't show up, no one will be offended. 2 weeks from now, you get to hear from Settled. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.